The wealthy heir's unusual decision. In the bustling city of Tanda, surrounded by rolling hills of lush cocoa plantations, lived Kofi Ofori, the only son of the powerful Ofori family. Their wealth was unmatched, their plantations sprawling for miles, and their influence reaching every corner of the region. Kofi, the heir to this fortune, was well known for his charm, intelligence, and good looks. Many in Tanda viewed him as the most eligible bachelor in the city. However, Kofi's life was far from perfect. His parents, Nana and Efua Ofori, were growing impatient. They constantly pressured him to settle down and marry a woman from a wealthy family, someone who could uphold the family's prestigious reputation. His mother, especially, often paraded daughters of her wealthy friends at social gatherings, hoping one of them would catch his eye. Despite the pressure, Kofi remained unmoved. He wanted more than wealth or beauty in a wife. To him, character mattered above all else. He longed for someone with a kind heart, a strong spirit, and genuine love, not someone enamored by his wealth. One evening, during a heated discussion at the family mansion, Kofi finally voiced his frustration. "I cannot choose a wife from this circle," he said firmly. "Every woman you bring to me sees my name and my fortune, not who I am." His mother frowned. "What's wrong with marrying a woman who complements our status? Your wife must reflect the Ofori name." His father, though usually quieter, nodded in agreement. "You're nearly 30, Kofi. It's time to secure the family legacy." But Kofi shook his head. "I want someone who loves me for me, not for my name or wealth. And if I can't find her here, I'll search elsewhere." "What do you mean?" his mother asked, alarmed. "I've decided to leave Tanda," Kofi announced. "I'll disguise myself as a poor man and live among ordinary people. Only then can I find someone with true values." The room fell silent. His parents exchanged shocked glances before his father broke the silence. "You must be out of your mind," he roared. "Leaving your responsibilities for a wild adventure. You're the heir to everything we've built." Kofi remained calm but resolute. "If I stay here, I never find what I'm looking for. Everyone knows me as the heir to the Ofori Empire. I'll always be surrounded by people who pretend to be something they're not. Give me 2 years. If I don't find someone by then, I'll let you choose my wife." His mother, torn between anger and disbelief, tried to change his mind. "Do you realize how ridiculous you look? What if you fail?" "I'd rather fail trying than spend a lifetime wondering," Kofi replied. Despite their objections, Kofi began preparing for his journey. He withdrew a modest amount of money and packed only simple clothes. Over the following weeks, he let his hair grow out and stopped grooming his beard, transforming himself into someone unrecognizable. The night before his departure, his parents reluctantly gave their blessing. 2 years, his father said sternly. "No more. If you don't return with a bride by then, we will make the decision for you." "I understand," Kofi replied, his voice steady. Early the next morning, Kofi left his luxurious life behind and boarded a rickety bus headed for the remote village of Amoya, a place where no one knew his name or his wealth. As the bus rumbled along the dusty road, Kofi looked out the window at the fading skyline of Tanda. For the first time in his life, he felt both nervous and free. "This is where my journey begins," he thought to himself. "If true love exists, I will find it." The road to Amoya was long and bumpy, but Kofi was determined to stay true to his mission. He was ready to trade his life of luxury for humility, in search of the one thing his wealth could never buy, true love. The simple life in Amoya. The sun was high in the sky when Kofi arrived in Amoya, a small, quiet village nestled in the lush countryside. The roads were uneven and dusty, and the houses were modest, made of clay and thatch. Unlike Tanda, where the streets were lined with cars and tall buildings, Amoya felt frozen in time. Life here was simpler, slower, but for Kofi, it was exactly what he needed. Disguised as a poor man, Kofi introduced himself to the villagers as Kwame, a trader who had lost everything and was looking to start afresh. His clothes were old and faded, his hair unkempt, and his once polished shoes were now dusty from the journey. The villagers eyed him with suspicion. Outsiders were rare in Amoya, and Kwame's arrival sparked murmurs of curiosity and doubt. He approached an elderly woman selling roasted plantains by the roadside. "Good afternoon, Ma," Kwame said politely. "I'm looking for a place to stay. Do you know anyone who might have a room to rent?" The woman squinted at him, taking in his appearance. "A room," she said, her tone skeptical. "What can you pay for it, stranger?" Kwame pulled out a small pouch of coins and showed her a modest sum. The woman shook her head. "You'll need more than that for a decent room. Try Mama ESI down the road. She rents out a room or two, though it's nothing fancy." Thanking her, Kwame followed the directions to Mama ESI's house. It was a small, weathered structure with a sagging roof, but it radiated warmth. Mama ESI, a widow in her 60s with a kind face and gentle demeanor, greeted him at the door. "Good afternoon, Ma," Kwame said with a slight bow. "My name is Kwame. I've fallen on hard times and need a place to stay. I can pay a little and will work hard to earn my keep." Mama ESI studied him for a moment before breaking into a kind smile. "You don't look like trouble," she said. "Come in. The room isn't much, but it's clean. You'll pay me when you can, eh?" The room was small, with cracked walls and a creaky wooden bed, but Kwame was grateful. He thanked Mama ESI profusely and set to work tidying the space. Adopting a new life. The next morning, Kwame began exploring the village. He quickly realized that life in Amoya was vastly different from Tanda. Here, every coin mattered, and every meal was hard-earned. He decided to start a modest business selling palm wine, a popular drink in the region. Using the little money he had left, Kwame bought palm wine in bulk from a local supplier. He carried it in calabashes to the bustling market square, where villagers gathered to trade goods. "Fresh palm wine," Kwame called out, trying to draw customers. "Sweet and affordable." At first, few people paid him any attention. The villagers were skeptical of this outsider. Some whispered that he might be a thief or a runaway, while others openly mocked his tattered appearance. One man sneered, "You think you can sell wine here, stranger? This isn't Tanda." Another added, "Look at his clothes. Who would buy from someone like him?" Kwame swallowed his pride and kept going, determined to prove himself. Slowly but surely, a few curious villagers began buying from him. His palm wine was good, and soon word spread that the stranger sold a quality product. Despite his growing reputation, life remained tough. He endured daily humiliation from villagers who refused to respect him, but Kwame took it all in stride. His focus was on his goal, to find a kind-hearted woman who saw beyond his humble exterior. Observing the women of Amoya. As Kwame settled into life in Amoya, he began paying attention to the women in the village. Many of them were beautiful and lively, but Kwame wasn't drawn to appearances alone. He wanted someone who was kind, hardworking, and genuine. At the market, he noticed how some women treated others. Some were polite and helpful, while others were rude and dismissive, especially toward the poor. Kwame kept a mental note of these interactions, observing carefully. One day, while delivering palm wine to a customer, he encountered Aba, a young woman known for her beauty and sharp tongue. She was surrounded by admirers and basked in their attention. When Kwame approached her store, she turned to him with disdain. "Do you think I would buy anything from you?" she said, laughing. "Go find your customers elsewhere." Kwame quietly walked away, unbothered. Aba's beauty didn't interest him, her attitude spoke louder than her looks. Later that week, Kwame met Akua, a soft-spoken woman who was helping an elderly neighbor carry her goods. Akua greeted him warmly and even offered to buy a small bottle of palm wine, despite her limited means. Her humility and kindness left a strong impression on Kwame. As the days turned into weeks, Kwame began to feel at home in Amoya. Mama ESI became like a mother to him, often offering advice and encouragement. "Kwame, you're a good man," she said one evening as they shared a simple meal. "Keep working hard, and good things will come your way." Kwame smiled, her words giving him strength. He had come to Amoya seeking true love, and while the journey was proving to be more challenging than he expected, he remained hopeful. "This village is full of stories," he thought to himself one night as he lay on the creaky bed. "If true love is here, I'll find it." The encounter with AFI and Adwa. The market square in Amoya was alive with its usual buzz of activity. Vendors shouted out their wares, children darted between stalls, and the air was thick with the aroma of spices, roasted plantains, and fresh palm wine. Kofi, still disguised as Kwame, had begun to establish himself as a regular figure at the market, selling his palm wine and occasionally helping customers carry their goods in exchange for a small fee. On this particular morning, as Kofi was scanning the crowd for potential customers, his eyes fell on two women who immediately stood out. They were walking side by side, carrying baskets filled with produce, their contrasting personalities evident in their demeanor. The elder sister, AFI, was strikingly beautiful. Her bright-colored dress and carefully braided hair drew attention wherever she went. Her confident stride and proud expression suggested she was used to admiration. However, the sharpness in her tone as she backed at a vendor made Kofi pause. The younger sister, Adwa, was less eye-catching but carried herself with quiet grace. Her modest clothing and gentle smile hinted at a humble spirit. She lagged slightly behind AFI, struggling to carry the heavier of the two baskets. Kofi seized the moment and approached them, offering his help. "Good morning," he greeted them politely. "May I assist you with your baskets?" AFI turned to him with a scornful laugh, her eyes sweeping over his shabby clothes. "Do I look like I need your help?" she sneered. "Go bother someone else, palm wine seller." Kofi remained calm, unfazed by her rudeness. He shifted his gaze to Adwa, who was clearly struggling but had said nothing. "What about you, miss?" he asked gently. "You seem to have your hands full. Allow me to help." Adwa hesitated, glancing nervously at her sister. AFI rolled her eyes and snapped, "Don't waste your time on him, Adwa. Let's go." But Adwa, after a moment's thought, smiled shyly and nodded. "Thank you," she said softly, handing him her basket. Kofi carried the basket with ease, walking a few steps behind the sisters as they made their way out of the market. AFI kept up a stream of complaints about the heat, the crowds, and the vendors, while Adwa remained quiet, occasionally glancing back at Kofi with gratitude. When they reached their home, a modest compound on the outskirts of the village, AFI stormed inside without a word. Adwa, however, paused to retrieve her basket. "Thank you for your help," she said, pulling out a few coins from her pocket. Kofi shook his head. "There's no need for payment," he said. But Adwa insisted, pressing the coins into his hand. "It's only fair," she said firmly. "Thank you again." Her kindness left an impression on Kofi, and as he walked back to the market, he couldn't stop thinking about her. Learning more about Adwa. That evening, as Kofi sat with Mama ESI, he decided to ask about the two sisters. "Do you know a woman named Adwa?" he asked casually. "She has an older sister named AFI." Mama ESI's face softened. "Oh, Adwa," she said with a sigh. "She's a good girl, very hardworking. But life hasn't been kind to her." "What do you mean?" Kofi pressed, genuinely curious. Mama ESI leaned back in her chair and began to explain. "Adwa is an orphan. Her mother died when she was a child, and her father remarried a woman named Akojua. A few years later, her father passed away, leaving Adua at the mercy of her stepmother and stepsister. And they don't treat her well? Mama Esi shook her head. Not at all. Akojua favors her own daughter, Afi, who's older and quite beautiful. Adua does all the cooking, cleaning, and chores, while Afi spends her days preening and gossiping. Poor Adua barely has a moment to herself. But she endures it all without complaint. That girl has a heart of gold. Kofi frowned, feeling a pang of sympathy. And Afi? Mama Esi snorted. Afi is the opposite. Proud and vain. She's been spoiled by her mother and thinks she's too good for anyone in this village. Many men have tried to court her, but she turns them all away, saying they're not worthy of her beauty. Kofi nodded thoughtfully. Adua's humility and kindness stood in stark contrast to her sister's arrogance. Afi's comfort, Adua's struggle. Over the next few weeks, Kofi began to notice more about the two sisters during his trips to the market. Afi would always arrive dressed in her finest, drawing attention with her loud voice and haughty demeanor. She would buy the best produce without hesitation, often criticizing the vendors for minor flaws in their goods. Adua, on the other hand, was always quiet and modest. She carried the heavier load and deferred to her sister in every decision. When Afi bought something, Adua would carry it. When Afi spoke, Adua would listen. Yet Adua's demeanor never showed bitterness or resentment, only quiet strength. One day, Kofi overheard a conversation between Adua and a vendor. "You're always working so hard, Adua," the vendor said kindly. "Don't you ever take a break?" Adua smiled faintly. "There's too much to do at home. If I don't do it, who will?" Kofi admired her resilience and began to feel a growing respect for her. She was different from anyone he had met in Amoya or even in Tanda. A new determination. As Kofi lay in bed that night, he couldn't stop thinking about Adua. Her kindness, humility, and quiet strength were exactly what he had been searching for. But he also knew that winning her heart wouldn't be easy. She lived under the shadow of her domineering stepmother and stepsister, and her life was far from her own. "I'll find a way," he thought to himself. "If she has endured so much with grace, then she deserves happiness. And I'll do everything in my power to make sure she gets it." With this new determination, Kofi prepared himself for the next step in his journey, a step that would bring him closer to Adua and further challenge the life he had built in disguise, growing bonds. Months passed, and Kofi, still living as Kwame, found himself becoming a familiar figure in Adua's life. The two often crossed paths at the market, where Kofi would help her carry goods back to her home. Their interactions were simple but meaningful. Each conversation revealed more about Adua's character, and each act of kindness deepened their bond. Adua's dreams and challenges. One afternoon, as they walked together from the market, Kofi noticed that Adua seemed quieter than usual. Her normally bright expression was clouded by worry. "Is everything alright, Adua?" Kofi asked, glancing at her as he balanced a basket on his shoulder. She hesitated before answering, "It's nothing important." Kofi gave her a gentle smile. "If it's troubling you, then it's important." After a moment of silence, Adua sighed. "I've always dreamed of opening my own tailoring shop. I love sewing, and I'm good at it. But my stepmother says it's a waste of time. She says I should focus on my chores and leave such foolish ideas behind." Kofi frowned. "Why does she think it's foolish?" Adua shrugged. "She thinks no one would take me seriously. She believes only Fi deserves attention and success. I've tried to save a little money from what I earn at the market, but," her voice trailed off, and she looked away. Kofi felt a surge of admiration and sadness. Despite her struggles, Adwa still clung to her dreams, even if they seemed out of reach. You shouldn't give up, Kofi said firmly. You're talented and hardworking, Adwa. If anyone can make it happen, it's you. Adwa smiled faintly. Thank you, Kwame. That means a lot. AFI's growing suspicion. While Kofi and Adwa's bond deepened, AFI began to take notice. She had initially dismissed Kwame as a lowly palm wine seller, but over time, she observed things that made her suspicious. For one, Kofi seemed far too well-spoken and confident for someone of his supposed status. His manners and thoughtful gestures were unlike anyone in the village. AFI's curiosity grew into suspicion, and her suspicion soon turned into interest. One day, while Kofi was helping Adwa carry goods to their home, AFI stepped outside and called out to him. Kwame, isn't it? She said, her tone unusually sweet. Yes, ma'am, Kofi replied politely. AFI flashed him a dazzling smile. You've been spending a lot of time helping my sister. You must be very generous. I just like to help where I can, Kofi said, keeping his tone neutral. Well, if you're feeling generous, why not help me too? I could use a strong man to carry my things next time I go to the market. Kofi nodded politely. Of course. Just let me know when. AFI's smile widened. I'll let you know soon. As Kofi walked away, he felt uneasy. He could sense AFI's growing interest in him, and it was clear she suspected he might not be who he seemed. He decided to keep his distance, focusing instead on his connection with Adwa. Kofi and Adwa's growing connection. As the weeks went on, Kofi and Adwa spent more time together. Their conversations became deeper, filled with shared stories, laughter, and moments of quiet understanding. One day, as they rested under the shade of a mango tree after a long day at the market, Kofi turned to Adwa. You've been through so much, yet you're always kind to everyone, he said. How do you do it? Adwa smiled softly. Kindness doesn't cost anything, Kwame. My mother always told me that no matter how hard life gets, we should never lose our kindness. I try to honor her memory by living that way. Kofi's heart swelled with admiration. Adwa's strength and humility were unlike anything he had encountered before. AFI's attempts to win Kofi over. Meanwhile, AFI continued to find ways to interact with Kofi, determined to uncover the truth about him. She began showing up at the market more often, dressed in her finest clothes, always finding excuses to talk to him. Kwame, she said one day, sidling up to him as he sold palm wine. You work so hard. Don't you ever take a break? Kofi smiled politely. There's always work to be done. AFI laughed, brushing her hair back dramatically. You should let me take you to one of our village dances. You could use some fun. Thank you for the offer, Kofi replied, but I'm not much of a dancer. Though AFI persisted, Kofi remained distant, his mind and heart focused on Adwa. Kofi's decision. One evening, as Kofi sat outside Mama ESI's house, he reflected on everything he had learned about Adwa. Her resilience, kindness, and quiet strength had completely won him over. He thought about her dreams of becoming a tailor, her gentle nature, and the way she treated everyone with respect, even those who didn't deserve it. Kofi realized that Adwa was exactly the kind of woman he had been searching for. She didn't care about wealth or status, she cared about people. I've made my decision, Kofi thought to himself. I want to marry her. But how can I do it without revealing who I really am? He knew the path ahead wouldn't be easy. Adwa's stepmother, Akoshua, and her sister, AFI, would likely stand in his way. But Kofi was determined to prove his love and win Adwa's heart, no matter the challenges. With a deep breath, he resolved to take the next step in his journey, a step that would change both his life and Adwa's forever. The proposal and the test. The village of Amoya had grown quieter as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a golden hue over the thatched rooftops. Kofi stood near the market, waiting for Adwoa. He had spent weeks building up the courage for this moment, rehearsing his words over and over again. Tonight, he was determined to tell her how he felt. When Adwoa finally appeared, carrying a basket of fresh produce, Kofi's heart skipped a beat. Her modest demeanor and warm smile only solidified his decision. He walked up to her, his palms sweating despite the cool evening air. Adwoa, he began, his voice steady but nervous, "Can I talk to you for a moment?" Adwoa tilted her head slightly, curious. "Of course, Kwame. Is something wrong?" Kofi hesitated for a second, then spoke from his heart. "Adwoa, I've watched you for months. I've seen your kindness, your strength, and the way you treat everyone with respect, no matter how hard life has been to you. You're unlike anyone I've ever met." Adwoa looked down, her cheeks flushing. "Kwame, I've fallen in love with you, Adwoa," Kofi continued. "I want to spend the rest of my life with you. Will you marry me?" Adwoa's hesitation. Adwoa's eyes widened in surprise. She opened her mouth to speak but struggled to find the words. Finally, she said, "Kwame, I don't know what to say. You've been so kind to me, but..." "But what?" Kofi asked gently. Adwoa sighed, her shoulders slumping. "My stepmother would never allow it. She controls everything in my life, and she would never agree to this. And how would we live? You work so hard, but you don't earn much. I don't want us to struggle." Kofi reached out and took her hand, his touch reassuring. "Adwoa, I know your life hasn't been easy, but I promise you, I'll do everything I can to take care of you. I may not have much now, but I'm determined to build a life for us." Adwoa looked into his eyes, searching for any hint of doubt, but all she saw was sincerity. Finally, she nodded slowly. "If you're serious about this, you need to speak to my stepmother." The meeting with Akoshua. The next morning, Kofi arrived at Adwoa's home, his heart pounding in his chest. Adwoa's stepmother, Akoshua, was seated outside, weaving a basket. Efi lounged nearby, lazily fanning herself. Both women looked up as Kofi approached. "What brings you here, palm wine seller?" Akoshua asked, her tone dripping with disdain. Kofi took a deep breath and stepped forward. "Good morning, Ma. I've come to speak with you about Adwoa." Akoshua raised an eyebrow. "Adwoa? What about her?" "I want to marry her," Kofi said boldly. Efi burst out laughing, nearly doubling over in amusement. "You? Marry Adwoa? That's the funniest thing I've heard all year." Akoshua, however, didn't laugh. She set down her basket and looked Kofi up and down, her expression a mix of incredulity and contempt. "You must be joking," she said. "What could you possibly offer my daughter? You can barely take care of yourself." "I'm serious, Ma," Kofi replied firmly. "I love Adwoa and want to make her my wife." Akoshua leaned back, her arms crossed. "Fine. If you want to marry Adwoa, you have to pay the bride price. But don't think I'll make it easy for you." She stood and disappeared into the house, returning a few minutes later with a long list scribbled on a piece of paper. Handing it to Kofi, she smirked. "Here's what you need to bring: 10 crates of fine fabrics, 20 pieces of gold jewelry, 50 yards of silk, and a herd of 20 cattle." Kofi stared at the list. The demands were outrageous, far beyond what anyone in the village could afford. Akoshua was clearly trying to discourage him. Efi leaned in, grinning maliciously. "I hope you're ready to spend the rest of your life saving for that, Kwame." Kofi's determination. But to their surprise, Kofi didn't flinch. He folded the paper and tucked it into his pocket. "I'll return in 1 week with everything you've asked for," he said calmly. Akosua laughed, shaking her head. "You bring all that? Don't make promises you can't keep, boy." Kofi didn't respond. He simply nodded, turned, and walked away. Behind him, AFI and Akosua continued laughing, convinced that he would fail. A new hope. That evening, Kofi returned to Mama ESI's house, his mind racing. The list was daunting, but he wasn't worried. He knew he had the means to fulfill Akosua's demands, he just had to reveal his true identity. The next morning, Kofi boarded a bus back to Tanda. As he traveled, he thought about everything he had learned during his time in Amoya. Adua's kindness, strength, and resilience had captured his heart, and now it was time to prove that he was worthy of her. When he arrived in Tanda, Kofi returned to his family estate. His sudden appearance in his humble disguise startled the staff, but they quickly recognized him and rushed to welcome him back. Kofi went straight to his father's office. "Father, I found the woman I want to marry," he announced. His father looked up, surprised. "You have? Who is she?" "A woman from Amoya," Kofi said. "Her name is Adua. She's humble, kind, and everything I've been searching for." His father smiled. "If she's who you've chosen, then we'll support you. What do you need?" "I need everything on this list," Kofi said, handing his father the paper Akosua had given him. His father read it and chuckled. "This is quite the bride price. But if it's for the woman you love, we'll make it happen." They promise. Over the next few days, Kofi and his family gathered everything on the list. The crates of fine fabrics, gold jewelry, silk, and cattle were loaded into a convoy of trucks, ready to be transported to Amoya. As Kofi prepared to return to the village, he couldn't help but smile. He had no doubt that Akosua and AFI would be shocked by his arrival. But more importantly, he was determined to show Adua that his love for her was real and that he was ready to build a future with her. 1 week, he thought. And I'll be back for her. The grand reveal. The convoy rumbled through the dusty road leading to the small village of Amoya. The setting sun cast a golden glow over the line of luxury vehicles, their polished exteriors glinting brightly, a stark contrast to the modest surroundings. Inside the lead car, Kofi sat in quiet anticipation, dressed in a sharp traditional outfit befitting his true status as the heir to the vast Ofori Empire. This moment was not just about revealing himself, it was about proving his love and commitment to Adua. Returning to Tanda, Kofi's transformation. When Kofi had returned to his family estate in Tanda a week earlier, his household staff had barely recognized him. His humble clothes, unkempt hair, and rugged appearance had caused quite a stir. "Master Kofi, what happened to you?" one of the maids exclaimed, her eyes wide with concern. Kofi smiled. "I've been on a journey, that's all. But now, I'm back, and I need your help." His family rallied around him, surprised but supportive when he explained his story and the reason for his return. They were eager to help him fulfill the extravagant bride price demanded by Adua's stepmother, Akosua. Within days, the Ofori family had gathered everything on the list: 10 crates of fine fabrics, 20 pieces of gold jewelry, 50 yards of silk, and a herd of 20 cattle. Each item was carefully packed into trucks, accompanied by a small fleet of luxury cars. Before departing, Kofi met privately with his parents. "I found the woman I want to marry," he told them. "She's humble, kind, and everything I've been searching for. I hope you love her as much as I do." His father clapped him on the shoulder. "If she's won your heart, she's already part of the family." The arrival in Amoya. When the convoy reached Amoya, the villagers gathered in droves, their jaws dropping in amazement. It was as if a royal procession had descended upon their quiet village. Children ran alongside the vehicles, cheering, while adults whispered in disbelief. Isn't that Kwame? Someone murmured. It can't be. He was just a palm wine seller. Kofi stepped out of the lead car, his appearance transformed. Gone were the tattered clothes and unkempt hair. In their place was a well-groomed man dressed in fine traditional robes, exuding confidence and elegance. The murmurs grew louder as people pieced together the truth. The poor trader they had known was actually a wealthy man in disguise. Confronting Akosua. Kofi walked straight to Adua's home, where Akosua and AFI were waiting, their faces a mix of confusion and disbelief. The convoy of vehicles parked outside their compound, and men began unloading the items on the bride price list, the gold jewelry, fine fabrics, silk, and even the cattle. Akosua's eyes widened as each item was presented. What is the meaning of this? She stammered, looking from Kofi to the convoy. Kofi smiled politely. I told you I would meet your demands, Mo. Here is everything you asked for. Akosua was speechless. She had never imagined that Kofi, the man she had mocked as a poor palm wine seller, could fulfill her impossible demands. AFI, standing nearby, looked equally stunned, her earlier disdain replaced with envy and regret. I don't understand, Akosua finally said. My name isn't Kwame, Kofi explained calmly. I am Kofi Ofori, heir to the Ofori Empire in Tanda. I came here in disguise to find a woman who values character over wealth. Your daughter, Adua, has proven to be that woman. Adua's reaction. Inside the house, Adua had been watching the scene unfold from the doorway, her emotions a whirlwind of shock, confusion, and disbelief. When Kofi turned and met her eyes, she stepped forward, her voice trembling. You lied to me, she said, her hands clenched. You pretended to be someone you're not. Kofi approached her slowly, his tone honest. I didn't mean to hurt you, Adua. I needed to be sure that you loved me for who I am, not for my wealth or status. Everything I said to you was true, my feelings, my respect for you, my admiration for your strength and kindness. Please understand why I did this. Adua looked into his eyes, searching for any hint of deception. Instead, she saw only sincerity. Her heart ached with the weight of his words. I don't know how to feel, she admitted, her voice soft. You should have trusted me from the start. I know, Kofi said. And I'm sorry. But I promise you this, I will spend the rest of my life making it up to you. If you have me, I want to build a life with you, a life where your dreams matter as much as mine. Adua's eyes filled with tears. Despite her initial anger, she couldn't deny the depth of Kofi's love and the lengths he had gone to prove it. Slowly, she nodded. I forgive you, she said quietly. And I love you too. A reluctant agreement. Akosua, realizing she had no choice, reluctantly gave her blessing to the union. The bride price had been paid in full, and Kofi's wealth and status left her no room for argument. AFI, still seething with jealousy, tried to interject. You could have had me, she said bitterly. Kofi looked at her calmly. It was never about appearances, AFI. True beauty lies in the heart, and Adua has shown me more beauty than I ever thought possible. A celebration begins. With Akosua's reluctant blessing, preparations for the wedding began immediately. The villagers, still in awe of Kofi's transformation, rallied to celebrate the union. Adua, though still adjusting to the whirlwind of events, felt a newfound hope for the future. As Kofi and Adua stood side by side, surrounded by cheering villagers, Kofi whispered to her, "This is just the beginning, Adua. Together, we'll build the life you've always dreamed of." And for the first time in years, Adua allowed herself to believe in happiness. A joyous union. The day of Kofi and Adua's wedding dawned bright and beautiful, the village of Amoya alive with festive energy. People from both Tanda and Amoya had come together for the grand occasion, their cultures blending harmoniously to create a celebration unlike any the villagers had ever seen. A grand ceremony. The ceremony took place under a canopy of flowers and colorful decorations. Drummers and dancers filled the air with vibrant rhythms, while the aroma of delicious traditional dishes wafted through the air. Kofi, dressed in a regal Kent cloth, stood proudly at the altar, his face beaming with joy. Adwa emerged from her home moments later, escorted by Mama Esi. Her dress was a stunning combination of Amoya's simple elegance and Tanda's luxurious flair, adorned with gold accents gifted by Kofi's family. She looked radiant, her smile lighting up the crowd as she walked toward Kofi. The two exchanged vows in a ceremony that honored the traditions of both regions. Elders from Amoya blessed their union with heartfelt prayers, while Kofi's family from Tanda presented lavish gifts as a symbol of their acceptance of Adwa. It was a celebration of love, unity, and cultural harmony, honoring Mama Esi and the villagers. After the ceremony, Kofi took the time to honor those who had supported him during his time in Amoya. He stood before the crowd and addressed them with gratitude. I came to this village as a stranger, but you welcomed me and taught me the value of humility and hard work, he said. To Mama Esi, who gave me shelter and treated me like a son, I owe you more than words can express. Kofi then presented Mama Esi with a new home, built on a piece of land he had purchased near the village center. The crowd erupted into cheers as Mama Esi wiped tears of joy from her eyes. To the other villagers, Kofi gifted tools, supplies, and funds to improve the market and community facilities. This village gave me more than I could ever repay, he said. I hope these gifts help make life here even better for generations to come. Adwa's boutique. After the celebrations in Amoya, Kofi and Adwa moved to Tanda, where a new chapter of their life awaited. One of Kofi's first gifts to Adwa was a boutique in the heart of the city, fully stocked with sewing machines, fabrics, and all the tools she needed to bring her dreams to life. Adwa stood in the boutique on its opening day, overwhelmed with emotion. You remembered, she whispered to Kofi, her voice thick with gratitude. Of course I did, Kofi replied with a smile. Your dreams are as important as mine. This is your space to create, to shine. The boutique quickly became a success, with Adwa's designs gaining popularity in both Tanda and Amoya. Her creativity and kindness drew customers from all walks of life, and she soon became known as one of the most talented tailors in the region. AFI and Akojua, a lesson learned. Back in Amoya, AFI and Akojua were left to reflect on the choices that had led to their current situation. With Adwa gone, their household felt emptier and lonelier. The villagers, who had long admired Adwa's humility, began to distance themselves from the haughty and selfish AFI. Maybe we were too harsh on her, Akojua admitted one day, her voice heavy with regret. AFI, though reluctant to admit it, nodded. We underestimated her. And we underestimated Kwame, no, Kofi. Their greed and arrogance had cost them not only Adwa's companionship but also the respect of the community. Left to face the consequences of their actions, they began to understand the importance of humility and kindness, though it was a lesson learned too late. The moral of the story. Kofi and Adwa's love story became a legend in both Tanda and Amoya, a tale shared around firesides and in classrooms. The villagers spoke of how a wealthy man disguised himself as a poor trader to test the true nature of the people around him and how he found a woman of genuine character in the most humble of circumstances. The story carried a powerful moral lesson. Humility opens doors that pride cannot. Kindness and inner beauty hold more value than wealth and appearances. True love is built on respect, understanding, and shared dreams. A happily ever after. As the years passed, Kofi and Adwa built a life filled with love, laughter, and shared purpose. They frequently visited Amoya, ensuring the village continued to thrive. Mama ESI became a cherished member of their family, often staying with them in Tanda. Adwoa's boutique flourished, and Kofi expanded the family business, ensuring their children would inherit not just wealth but also the values they held dear. Together, they proved that love grounded in truth and integrity could overcome any obstacle, and that even the most unlikely of journeys could lead to a joyous union. The end.